know what we want to look for, given the fact that speed is a losing problem, not a getting problem. And given the fact that each of us every day is a day older than we were yesterday, and that's pretty much inevitable, and that we want our speed solutions to be sustainable. So the first is that we always want to add by subtracting, all right? So given that we are wasting somewhere between 91 and 97%, the opportunities for saving energy are really limitless, and the opportunities for increasing energy stores are really not much of a payoff, all right? Reducing drag or turbulence. And you know, it's an interesting thing, because you think about it, and you think about from the time you first stood at the edge of the pool and wanted to go down the other end. Did thoughts of drag or turbulence enter your mind? All right, and how many times since then have you really focused on drag and turbulence and known, not just, okay, well, that's important, known how to change it, all right, and decided to prioritize that in your practice design. I will think these thoughts, all right, I will build my practice upon this. All right, so reducing drag or turbulence. In the stroke itself is reducing slippage. All right, not adding power, because a lot of power with slippage is totally wasted. All right, it's about purchase. It's about water is a really elusive substance. All right, it doesn't lend itself to traction. All right, and the time I first noticed this was, again, one of those flat earth, round earth moments, which was I was at the NCAA championships. When I was coaching, I used to go a lot just to watch the best swimmers. And I was watching the 100-yard freestyle, and I realized that, and I hadn't noticed this, I'd been coaching probably 15 years before I really noticed this. I noticed that in the 100-yard freestyle, I noticed their hands were moving more slowly, and then I thought I was just going to look on the first lap or two in subsequent heats, and I was going to look for people whose hands were moving more slowly, because you can see some people are really moving fast, and some people it just looks by comparison remarkably leisurely, all right? And I started looking, and I kept seeing the same thing. I didn't need a stopwatch to determine who was going to make finals. The slower your hands were, the better your chance of making finals were, all right? Again, who is ever thinking in that moment when someone in the next lane is going by, or you're in that vulnerable space with the churning around you, slow your hands down. Thought never occurs, all right? And then finally, eliminate pacing errors. I mean, that is always the first place to look at. In a triathlon, what happens? 1,500 meters, even half a mile, first 100 meters, everybody's going crazy, all right? And then they're out of breath, and they're starting to feel anxious and uncomfortable, and the wetsuit is pressing, and so on, all right? And just to start out with the idea that I'm going to stroke slowly. In fact, because it's legal, I think it's not a bad idea to wear a tempo trainer. In that, Shane Eversfield, who's here today, one of our coaches, wrote the Zendurance book. He's down in the pool coaching right now at the clinic. The last Ironman he did, he wore a tempo trainer. Can't do it in master swimming, not allowed, but in triathlon it's not disallowed. So tempo trainer at 1.1, which is a stroke every 1.1 seconds, or about 54, 55 strokes a minute. Now in the pool, that will feel kind of brisk, but in open water it feels more leisurely, all right? And so he set it at 1.10, and he was just going to spend the 2.4 miles sinking to a beep, just thinking about sinking to a beep. And he said in the first 200 to 300 meters, people were pulling away. And then for the last two-thirds of the race, he was passing people nonstop. And at no point was he trying to pass anyone. Was he trying to catch anyone? He just kept with that thought, sink, beep, 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 and magically just kept going by people, all right? So eliminating pacing errors, and that's one way.